NEIC conference in the state of Iowa, and it's disbanding. And so we had a celebration and had a bunch of
champs and alumni, and it's pretty cool.
Yep, they had that at the Waverly Area Veterans Post, and then on Saturday, we were fortunate enough to host the final wrestling tournament for the NEIC at WSR, and recognized all of WSR's champs, and then any four-time champs of any other school in the conference, and that was pretty cool as well. And then had another thing at Joe's after that, right?
Yep.
And then what did you do yesterday?
Spent all day at USA State.
Yeah, for little kids, and coaching his own kid and coaching other kids in our district as well. So when you talk about being a coach and you're the head coach, there's still a lot of different roles that you play. So he's got a lot of experience. Listen to him today, you'll learn a lot. And just like you guys were last time with Coach Willis, ask questions, because that really gets those thoughts going and what can really help you guys out the most. All right, you ready, Coach?
Yeah.
Okay.
See how many times my computer goes to sleep on me here, but I'm here for
What
that.
time do you have? Anybody have a Mac board? Keep it in. I don't have a Mac right now.
Well, we'll roll with it. Anything ready for you? Alright, so I'll get started here. As Jed said, I'm Eric Wickham, I'm head coach at Waverly Shawrock. Graduate there. It's kind of like a little bit of background on me. And I guess before I get going, if you got questions, shoot them out. Like, this stuff totally interests me, and there's questions that I, like as a coach, wish I could ask other coaches all the time. So if there's something, whether it's I'm talking about it or just something that pops in your mind of like, I want to know how this works, let me know. Ask away, okay? Because that stuff, you know, every coach has some similarities, right? But you know, how do you keep the engine going and so forth? That's the stuff that interests me about successful coaches and stuff. So you get something, let me know. But just kind of like a little bio on me, I guess. I think when I was thinking about this, and one of the questions like, you know, why did you decide to start coaching, and what was your interest? And I think for me, like this kind of started when I was younger, and I think probably for me, the reason that it started and I started kind of having this desire was, it was one, the competitiveness in me, and then also I feel like growing up as an athlete, that maybe I was always kind of doubted. And obviously I'm not a very tall guy. I was a little bit lighter back then. But you know, I didn't have those great attributes. I didn't have blazing speed. And I wanted to be the guy. And so that competitive nature started for me. High school, I played football. Football coach wasn't going to play me. I ended up being a two-time all-district middle linebacker for Waverly. Led the team in tackles both years, state quarterfinals. Baseball, we went to state baseball. Couldn't feel the ball. If I could let that thing bounce off my chest, I could whip it across the field. So I make plays, right? So like, actually my wrestling coach, the one story that he would always kind of tell people about like the nature of me was, there was a specific match, actually a conference opponent that I wrestled a lot. He told me one time, I got a bloody nose. Kid was cross-facing me and trying to rip my nose off. I started bleeding. He's like, knew from that moment, the match was over. Because that was kind of the nature of me and who I was. Went on, played rugby at University of Northern Iowa. We took 5th in the nation. Played on multiple different all-star teams with that around the country. played rugby with Raymond County Bucks, we're national finalists. So being competitive is something that is in me, and that started a long time ago. Just kind of my coaching background, a little bit, I've coached 4 state championship rugby teams, the three girls Iowa Wrestling Coaches Association state championship team wrestling, and then have 7 state championships as a coach, Waverly Sharp in the sport of wrestling. So, been around quite a bit, but you know, like you say, what is it that makes you coach? And I think it is that every day waking up and it's like, what can we go win today? And that drives me, fuels me. You know, one of my buddies says that he thinks I have my dark side is my competitiveness, and you know, getting into wrestling, I think specifically why that really became a passion for me. I don't think there's any other sport that you can really measure the progress of an individual like you can in wrestling. And I'm not just talking about wins and losses. I'm talking about just as a person, how they go about things, how they go about their business, the kind of person that they are. All those things are really easy to measure as a coach, and certainly being able to see kids progress, you know, is that's why I keep doing what I do. There's got to be something that you know, the juice is worth the squeeze type of deal. There's got to be something that keeps you getting up every day, and for me, that's what it is. So I put down here my top 4 things if you want to be a great coach that you got to be able to do. Number 1, you got to hustle. Everything's hustle. Okay. And I'll get to like schedule a little bit here. If you take a look at this schedule, you know, this isn't like just last week. This is every week during the season. Is what my schedule looks like. Okay. You know, like our practices, run lifts, everything. I'm at everything. Okay. We have obviously our weight room and stuff. We have weight room coordinator stuff. I run all of our stuff during the season. Practice, obviously, you know, we'll have our varsity guys are in the room or at the school pretty much every morning and night. That's just how we operate, and we've done that for decades, and it's been successful for us. And then on top of it, I had our youth program for our third through 8th grade as well. Then I run a special group on Monday nights with like our top end kids as well. So that's 3 nights a week as well. Then I'm doing that. And then like on Wednesday, I take a group of our kids down to Cedar Falls to club practice as well. So free time isn't really a thing. And then when I am home and maybe I get to chat for a little bit, then I'm ready to practice. So it's a real thing. And if you're not going to hustle, obviously there's different ways to do it, but notice what I said, if you want to be a really good coach, those are things that you'll have to do. I said number 2 was you're going to have something within you, that edge that you can keep. Hey, how are you going to deal with getting a parent phone call that doesn't like the way that things are going? You know, are you going to let that get you down? You know, what about when you don't have some kids go out that are supposed to be some of your top kids? How's that going to affect you? You know, what's going to keep you going? I said, what keeps you going on a daily basis? I had this conversation with my son this morning about like what keeps you going all the time. You know, for me, I don't really want to go practice today. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I could get done. Like, what makes you keep? For me, it's like, no, we have to practice because we have to get better at these things today. And so for me, knowing what I can bring, if I bring the right energy, if I'm focused, I know that we can get better that day. And so for me, that is a driving force. And that's a year-round thing. Like I told you, this schedule right here, right now, that's busy. I will tell you, my spring is just as bad. because that's a high compete time for wrestling, for our high school guys and so forth, freestyle, Greco, and all that kind of stuff. Number 3, you have to be willing to create and form bonds with your athletes. Probably every coach that you'll hear from will talk about, relationships, okay? And that's huge. I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. And then, the hardest one to accomplish, and it's a quote from Kirby Smart, Georgia head football coach. I love this one. You have to be willing to make tough decisions that can negatively affect the people you care about. You have to be willing to make decisions that can negatively affect people you care about. This is the hardest one for me. Okay, for me, I'm really pretty sentimental kind of guy. Honestly, get down to it. I think more and more as I get older here too, I feel like I can cry about the stupidest things. Okay, but making those decisions is not easy. And kind of give you a little background on this, on what I'm talking about here. So 2009, I took my first head coaching job, Knoxville, Iowa. Anyone from the area, Knoxville? No? Okay. All right, Knoxville, Iowa, Southern Iowa. I've been assistant coach for 6 years at Waverly. Waverly Sharp was just coming off the greatest high school season ever in the state. The greatest team ever in the state of Iowa, 2008 Waverly Sharp. Finished number 4 in the country. That's all schools in the country, number 4, okay, which was unbelievable. We lost 2 close ones at Apple Valley, we would have been number 1. Okay, I think we lost like 32-29 down here, actually, in 11 at the time, and we win that one. We're number 1 in the country. Okay. Anyway, so hey, I got a teaching job in Knoxville. I got a head coaching job, and I'm like, let's go win. Let's do it. And I'll tell you right away, that's not what happened. Okay. As a young coach, there's a lot to learn. I'm still learning, and I'm not that young anymore. So 2011-12, I get the head coaching job back at Waverly, and by 2014, we had the number 34 team in the country. We ended up 3rd in the state of Iowa, but I still don't really know how good a coach I was at the time. 2018, 4 years later, we had the worst tournament finish at the state tournament that we'd had in over a decade. I think we scored like 38.5 points. There's somewhere outside the top 10. It was bad. We had 5 state place winners. They're all like 7. Don't score you many points. At that time, the former head coach, Rick Caldwell, who had won 9 state championships at Waverly, kind of reached out to me. He goes, hey, I think I got a couple things for you, but they're going to be really hard. You're going to have to make some decisions if that's the path you want to go down. But I think if you're willing to do it and you really want to have success, that these changes will make a difference. And I said, let's do it. Let's go. And so he kind of laid it out to me of what he saw needed to change. And largely, it was a commitment by all that was different than what we had going. It was holding standards a little bit higher. Talking about like what we were doing in the off season, what we were doing out of season. Not so much that anything was drastic in season, but it was our out of season stuff and our expectations and what we were willing to hold the kids to accountability wise. And basically, so we laid out a plan. We had a contract, and this is what we said, hey, this is what we're going to do. If you're not in, that's fine. Tell us not. But if you're in and you tell us that you're in, you're going to be held to this. And if not, you'll be asked not to come back until you can either honor that or we'll see you next season. And surprisingly, 95% of the kids were in. And they executed. to a T. And we had a couple that weren't. We had some kids that we kicked out, and I took some nasty phone calls about them. We kicked them out and said, hey, listen, if this is what you're gonna do, we're not interested, we'll see you next November, all right? And so, we had another kid that, we kicked him out, and he wanted to be stubborn about it. He needed to come back and talk to the coaches, and, you know, make peace, and then hold himself to the standard, and, he held out. That's what it was. He ended up being a state place winner for us the next year. So the difference in that's 2018. 2019, the difference was this. We went from scoring 38.5 points at the state tournament to scoring 157 and winning the state championship. We ended up the number 22 team in the country. That was the difference. And so, you know, like I said, making those tough decisions that negatively impact you. I'll give you too a little context on that kid that held out, that didn't want to come back and talk. That kid lived with me for a year. That kid lived with me for a year, basically trying to like get him on track. And you know, he was one of the ones at the end that he didn't want to buy into. And so that's what it was. And negatively impact on someone that I cared about, but that's what was going to be good for the team. And so that's a tough decision to make. That's a tough place to be at. So another thing that we've got going at Waverly Sharrock, what's it been now? 5 years ago, we got the girls' side of things rolling. I've gone to Fargo. If you're unfamiliar what that is Fargo is considered probably the toughest, outside of Super 32, be the toughest high school tournament in the country. Okay, and it's freestyle Greco. They're the Olympic style wrestling, and so I've been on staff for I don't know, long time, 20 years, and so I've been going up there every year. You continue to see the girls side of it continue to grow, and 6 years ago, my assistant and I were kind of sitting around and like, hey, what's the next step for Waverly Sharrock? Like, how do we continue to grow as a program and like stay ahead of the curve? You know, and we brought up girls wrestling. We knew it was coming, and we wanted to be kind of the first. Obviously, there's been female wrestlers in the state of Iowa for a long time, but we wanted to start it like a team. And so, whatever year that was, I can't remember now. I asked our administration if I could send it was in the spring, if I could send a survey out, just get a general idea of what we had interest-wise for girls if we got a team going. And, you know, got 30 responses or whatever. We ended up that fall with 11 girls that came out, and we ran it separate program. So it was, you know, I'd have a girls practice in the morning and then guys after school. And I worked it all around, like we have our run lift. So I moved our run lift to 6 a.m. and then got it done by 6:45 and then was able to go run girls. We just made it happen. And it was a lot, but it's what needed to happen. We wanted something separate and different, or their own. We wanted our females to be able to have ownership of something, and it wasn't just an extension of the boys. And so that's how we've done it all along. So I've manned that for 3 years, and then as you know, every year giving a little bit more off to coaches, like, hey, I want you to do this, I want you to take this. Because for us to be sustainable, obviously, I wasn't going to be able to run 2 programs like that at a high level for very long. And at the same time, once again, I felt it was really important that the girls program had its identity. And so the next big shift for us was we need separate coaching staffs. I had a lot of coaches that were dabbling in both. And let's be honest with you, when you're dabbling in both and kind of going back and forth to practices, I just don't think that's given your due diligence. So at that point, then we had to make some more tough decisions. You know, I sent some of my boys coaches that had been with me for a long, long time, I sent them to the girls. Had to make tough decisions. One of my very best assistant coaches, still one of my very best assistant coaches, our now girls head coach. He's a rock star, and I had to give him up. And that was tough. But once again, what was good for the program, had to make tough decisions. I don't know that those negatively affected us outside of that, having those resources, you know, they were split. So kind of keep that going. And this is all about like, hey, how do you continue to progress your program? Like, what's the next step for your program, and things? And so that first year we did it, Charlotte Bailey reached out to me, and I was like, hey, you know, it started some momentum. You know, Osage got in, Charles City got in. There's a bunch of Northeast Iowa schools, and then it started trickling of like, they were gonna have girls, they were gonna have more girls, push for girls. And so she kind of contacted me and said, hey, what do you think about hosting like a state tournament? And so that's when we got the Iowa Wrestling Coaches Officials Association involved to sponsor it and all that kind of stuff. And we had our first state tournament. I think there were 450 some girls registered in the state of Iowa. That first year, I think we had 188 at the state tournament. And now, I think the graphic I saw the other day was like 1,600 girls in the state of Iowa were registered for this season. So it's quadrupled over the last 4 years or whatever, participation. Okay? And so there again, you know, honestly, I do have a daughter. She's a 5th grader. She's kind of into wrestling, kind of into soccer, whatever. But that decision was made. How do we continue to build the program into something? How do we make it different than anywhere else? And we thought that was important. So that's where we kind of got rolling with that, I guess. I'm just rambling too. Anyone got any questions or anything? Talking. Okay. Let's see. So, if you take a look at this packet, it's pretty standard in regards to like stuff that I'm sure you see in either your programs or you have seen in the past and so forth. But a couple of things here that I just want to talk about, like that are important, and I'll kind of get into the bigger picture, like even getting people bought into the program and what it is. Okay. If you go to like the communication, okay, I'll tell you right now, communicating with high school students, you would think is really easy because they're always on their phones, and it's not. And I'm saying like getting responses and to things that you need to know, so forth. And to be honest with you, a lot of times it's even harder with the parents. Okay? So one of the things that we addressed this year is like a goal of our program was, I stole this from the coach at Air Force. They talk about highly effective communication. And so that was an emphasis for us this year, being better communicators. Not just me sending out information, but when I need information back, that we're getting communication from parents and kids. So you've got to have communication. It's funny, I talked to all different kids all along, throughout the entire state of Iowa, being with Team Iowa and so forth, and it's surprising how many coaches aren't very effective communicators. If you want to be effective as a coach, you've got to communicate, even when you don't want to. Like I get phone calls, like I don't really want to take this phone call, but I need to. Okay, so communication is important. Two other main things I want to kind of hit on here is competition dress. So I don't know, a couple years ago we started this, and I don't necessarily know why. I think a little bit of it is the emergence of, like, I call them super clubs in Iowa. You got Mullen, Siebel, Big Game, places like that, okay? And we were going to some tournaments, and it just kind of popped on our radar. We had some kids that were wearing different stuff and whatnot, and we didn't love it for a lot of different reasons. And so one of the things that we ask our kids when we're out competing during the season is that you're representing Waverly Sharp. And so I don't care if it's Waverly Sharp football or if it's something else, but or WSR Wrestling, black and gold, represent the school. Be proud of your community. And the other side of that too is I started thinking about a little bit, and I'm like, okay, who's our best guys? Jake Walker, Ryder Block, Craig Haggerty, these guys, they're studs, okay? Studs. Aiden Riggins, dude, they were always wearing WSR stuff. It's like, why are those guys doing it, those other guys aren't? Our best guys, when it's season, they represent our school, okay? And so I thought it was important for us to be on the same page. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I do know this. I've had plenty of fans told me they love it. It matters to someone, it matters to the community. And ultimately, in a program, a successful program, you have to have community support. So whether or not everybody loves it, whatever, it's just what it is. Last thing here that I just want to point out too, a few years ago, once again, we were trying to figure out how do we become a better team. And I felt like we just needed to spend more time together. And I thought we spent a lot of time together. Focus time. So during competitions, we started taking their cell phones. So we'll have their phones all day. And for a couple different reasons. One, we took the phones away, and then what happened? They all had to talk to each other. They all had to spend time together because they couldn't bury their face in their phone. It took away some stresses. It took away worrying about getting texts from mom or dad sitting up in the stands saying, you did this wrong, or hey, this next guy. Okay, that's for the coaches to deal with. Not mom and dad. Have fun up in the stands, mom and dad. That you get to watch. Okay? We get paid the big bucks down here to do our job. Okay? $6 grand I make years. And then like even wrestling. We have track wrestling where all the tournaments at. You can look up every guy and stuff. And we just thought that was a distraction. Brought on worries that we didn't need to focus on. Coaches were going to give our guys everything they needed to know before they stepped on the mat. They didn't need to know who they beat and who they lost, all that stuff. It's just a distractor. Control what you can control. So that's been a big success for us. This is just our packet that I hand out at the beginning of the year, give to parents. It's kind of leading into like buy-in for the family here. And I guess I say family because one of the things I tell all of our kids club parents every year, as well as our high school, is that that what goes on in the sport of wrestling and how important it is for the individual will a lot be dictated about how important it is for the entire family. Okay, it's a tough sport. It's hard. If parents are invested in it, the kid will be invested in it as well. Okay, and that can be a lot of different ways. We have gear orders back in the day, and everything nowadays you order something and they'll package it for you and stuff. That's not the way it used to be. It used to come in boxes. So my mom would set up tables in our garage, and she volunteered to sort everyone's orders, stuff like that. I knew she was invested. When my brother was little and didn't want to go to practice, and she's like, your brother's going, so you're going. I knew they were invested that we need to be at practice. taking care of making sure you had food for the tournaments, all that stuff. Parents can be invested in a lot of different ways. It doesn't mean they have to be a coach. It doesn't mean they have to be in there washing mats or something. But you gotta get everybody involved. You gotta get everybody invested. And it goes back to a little bit of that communication factor too, that we talked about. The next thing too, like relationships. My Lions got beat last night. Terrible second half. But you know, I told my boy last night, he's like crying because the Lions lost. I'm like, dude, in 12 years you have seen the Lions win more playoff games than I have in 40. So let's celebrate that. Okay. But there was a clip on about Dan Campbell, head coach for the Detroit Lions, and he was talking a little bit about Frank Ragnow. If you've been following it at all, he's center for the Detroit Lions, all-pro center. The game before, he got banged up pretty good, hip, knee, and he stayed in the game. And he's like, you know, the interviews afterwards, they're like, "Were you hurt?" He goes, "Man, I was hurt. Like, I was hurt." But he stayed on, played, and won the game at the time. He played again this week. And Dan Campbell was talking about, like, how do you get a professional athlete to put themselves on the line at 85%? You know, we're not talking about like high school athlete, you playing for your town and your school, and you have all that pride and like, hey, you know, we gotta win the big game type of thing. Like, these are professional athletes, they're getting paid millions of dollars. They're worried about like next week or like the next year of their contract, right? How do you get those guys to put it on the line? And he's talking about, it's about like relationships and the bonds that they have with the team, the bonds they have with the coaches. And talk about getting buy-in, you know, professional level athletes. Okay, that's all the way through. Okay, and so that's got to be there for them. You know, we got kids right now that we're trying to get them to take the next step. We're trying to get them to put in more in the off season. You know, they're close to being pretty good, but they got to take like the next step. And you know, part of that is, I feel like on our side of things, of doing a better job of making them feel like this is the place that they need to be. Making them feel like they're really wanted, they're needed, that they can do it. And so we're shouldering that and trying to make that next push for a bunch of these kids that are close, but they just don't know. They don't know who to trust. Am I going to make that big commitment or not? So once again there, you know, I think the getting buy-in, I think it starts with family. I think obviously the athlete's super important, and a lot of that's just like what kind of relationships that you can form with kids. And that's something that like you're going to work on every single day, because every kid's so different. What makes every kid tick is entirely different. And that's part of the reason too why I feel like for me it's so important to be at everything. I'm not talking about in season, I'm talking about all the time. So if we got off season workouts, I'm there. If we got lifts, I'm there. Because that's starting to form those relationships, even outside of the season. You know, I've been on here too, like some of the travel and stuff we do. You know, I take kids all over the place. Vegas, Atlanta, we've been to Seattle. You know, we travel and compete. And there again, there's opportunities to form those relationships as well. Oh, what else do you want?
Coach, can you mention how we are able to help those kids out when they do travel? And
Yeah,
what our program's like for that?
We have a pretty fortunate situation. So, as in every other program, I mean, we run our little Go Hawk tournament. That probably makes somewhere around $6,000 to $8,000. We host the AU districts, which is this weekend. This is a state qualifier for AU state. That's a bigger one. You know, talking more closer to $20,000. and then we have our Super Pee Wee, which is crazy. But through that, we have so obviously a pretty good bankroll, I guess you could say. And our top two priorities are coaching and competition. And so our budget, we put away a lot of money to take kids wherever we think we need to go. And so, finding money for those two things, we I guess, so we have a board. We have 12 people on our board right now. But those have been the focus. How do we get kids coaching? How do they get, how do we get out and compete and get better? We also have done a couple new things here. See, I think this was the second year. We call it our preseason bash. So August, September, we do a bags tournament, silent auction, deal with that. We've got like different stuff for kids to be there. It's open to the community. We try to get community involvement. We don't want just wrestling people. Just kind of a way to kind of kick off the season, and that's been really good to us as well in regards to making money for the club and the team. And there too, like we did something different this year. We were having a tough time like getting, different. Some business is really hard to like donate something to a silent auction, right? Okay, insurance business is pretty hard to donate something to a silent auction. And so one thing we did this year is they were able to sponsor a bags team. So like if Assured Partners gave $300, they could sponsor a team. And then we put our high school athletes or coaches on that team. Okay, so there was a way, we found ways to generate some more revenue with those businesses and stuff that really couldn't contribute anything else outside of that, or some t-shirts. So those have been our big fundraising deals. Like I said, we go everywhere. Because to go to Fargo, for example, at the end of summer, per kid it's $750. If you do both styles, it's $950. So that's a good chunk of change, and you're guaranteeing yourself 2 to 4 matches. But it's important to be there. So our club will pay like, in the past, I think we've paid $550 of $750, and basically $200. That's your gear package anyway, so they get to keep that stuff. So that's kind of like also trying to keep the wrestler invested and family invested as well. But that's the stuff that we're able to do and the opportunities we're able to provide. Yeah.
How do you manage kids who do multiple sports at Waverly Shaw? From what it sounds like, is your off season is very, very busy.
We have a lot of kids that do multiple sports. I'd say right now, the majority do. So I mean, we're totally cool with that. We're gonna have. I always kind of tell other coaches like, we need the multiple sport athletes, and we need some guys that are just gonna be the dudes, and that's just kind of the nature of it. But I try to sit down and figure out like, what can you do? What are your openings to be able to do things? And I was that multi-sport guy. My wife was the same way and whatnot. But she talks about like, hey, it's basketball season, but then I had volleyball at 7 o'clock, so I'm going volleyball. Like there's time, but time management is a whole nother thing too. And that's certainly something that kids have to learn and so forth. And the big thing is like, okay, if wrestling's really important to you, but you want to also do track or you want to do baseball, like then we need to find time. And I'll help you find time, and I'll make it convenient for you to be able to do that as much as I possibly can. So if we got a separate time to get a drill with someone, then we'll do it. But yeah, I mean, we've got a lot of them right now.
So obviously you're very committed. How do you generate that work-life balance?
It's a great question. It's tough. I think, first of all, I think you gotta be lucky and have a family a little bit that is willing to be in that lifestyle as well. You know, I'll tell you this though, it's been a lot easier the last few years in the sense that I do have kids that are also involved, and so it's not just time me away. But like I said, it's time management. You know, think about like, okay, the end of summer, we've got Fargo, I've got training camp, I'm at training camp. So on a normal year, June and July, like June through the middle of July, I'll be gone like 16 days for training. If I go to duels, training camp, and then to Fargo. And so we plan vacation after that. Or we know my 4-day window of these are the 4 days off Christmas break. Let's plan something for those 4 days. And so we gotta be flexible. Now, like the month of August, we're off. We have nothing in the month of August. So there again, we'll plan our stuff around that as well. Good question.
Well, and also your wife would come with the kids when they were younger, because that's where you were and that's where they wanted to be, even
Yep.
for tournaments or whatever too, so you just make it work that way.
And so my son Lincoln is a 7th grader now, and so he's typically, like especially in the off-season stuff, going with the high school group a lot, because a lot of the tournaments that we're at and so forth, he's competing at as well. So that makes life a little bit easier too, because he just can bring the crew.
You guys got any other questions for Coach Whitcomb? We're good? Thank you, appreciate it, that was fantastic.